In the quiet twilight of Maple Grove, Nathan, a seasoned judge of considerable repute, navigated the peaceful streets in his newly acquired Lexus. The hum of the engine and the gentle caress of jazz through the speakers offered him a much-needed respite from the day's taxing court proceedings. Despite the comfort of his car and the tranquility of his upscale neighborhood, Nathan's mind was not at ease. He had long been acquainted with the weight of his responsibilities, the judgments he passed, and their far-reaching impacts. Nathan, a black man who had ascended the rigorous ranks of justice in a society rife with silent prejudice, was intimately aware of the social undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of professional respect he received. His journey had not been an easy one. From his challenging youth in the bustling corridors of urban hardship to the hallowed halls of the legal academy, every step had been a battle against the veiled doubts of onlookers who often whispered that perhaps he did not belong. As the soft hues of sunset painted the suburban sky, a harsh glare of red and blue lights shattered the serenity. Nathan's heart sank as he checked his rearview mirror to see a police cruiser signaling him to pull over. With a steadying breath, he complied, guiding his Lexus to the curb, the pulsing lights reflecting off storefront windows, an unwelcome spotlight in his calm evening. The officer who approached his vehicle did so with a brisk, assertive stride that left no room for pleasantries. Officer Baker, as her badge identified her, tapped on his window with a stern expression, her eyes hidden behind reflective sunglasses despite the fading light. "License and registration," she demanded, her voice devoid of warmth. Nathan complied, his hand steady despite the flutter of apprehension. "May I ask what this is about, officer?" he inquired, maintaining the calm and authoritative tone he used in his courtroom. "You were driving suspiciously slow. Step out of the vehicle," she commanded, ignoring his question. Nathan's brow furrowed at the request. He knew the law better than many, and this stop seemed less about traffic violations and more about something unspoken, something all too familiar. Reluctantly, he opened his car door and stepped out into the cool evening air, his legal mind cataloging every detail of this encounter. The neighborhood, usually quiet and inviting, now felt like a stage for a play he did not wish to star in. "We've had reports of stolen vehicles matching this description," Officer Baker explained curtly, her eyes scanning Nathan's attire, a well-tailored suit and polished shoes. Hardly the garb of a typical car thief. "This is my vehicle, officer. I purchased it just last week," Nathan responded, his voice a blend of frustration and restraint. "I live just down the street." The officer's gaze did not waver, her suspicion palpable. "Hands on the vehicle," she ordered, motioning towards the hood of his Lexus. As Nathan complied, placing his hands on the cold metal, he couldn't help but feel the sting of humiliation. The soft jazz from his car radio, once soothing, now seemed a distant echo, muffled by the tension of the moment. He noticed curtains twitching in the neighboring houses, eyes peering out to catch a glimpse of the unfolding drama. "I am Judge Nathan Greenwood," he finally declared, hoping his professional stature would bring some sense of normalcy to the encounter. But Officer Baker seemed unimpressed. "We'll see about that," she muttered, her hand resting ominously on her holstered weapon. The gravity of the situation deepened, and Nathan's thoughts raced. This was not just a traffic stop. It was a vivid reminder of a societal ailment, a reflection of the biases that still plagued even the most privileged among us. As he stood there, under the scrutinizing gaze of law enforcement and the watchful eyes of his community, Nathan realized this moment was about more than just verifying his identity. It was about confronting and enduring injustice that transcended his personal ordeal. The escalation, the standoff at the side of Nathan's car grew tense as Officer Baker radioed in to verify the Lexus's registration. Nathan stood still, his hands pressed against the cool hood, while the suburban street, typically serene, seemed to pulse with the unspoken tension of the scene unfolding. "I'm sure you understand. We need to ensure the vehicle isn't stolen," Officer Baker stated mechanically, her eyes never leaving Nathan. Though the statement was procedural, It carried an undertone of suspicion that Nathan felt was all too familiar. A suspicion not about what he had done, but who he was. "This car is registered to me. Officer, I am a judge in this district. Perhaps you might recognize my name?" Nathan tried again, his voice a blend of hope and mounting irritation. There was a pause, the officer's expression unreadable behind her sunglasses as she listened to the crackling response from her radio. As they waited, the neighbors' curtains fluttered more aggressively. Whispers carried across the manicured lawns. The community's curiosity now morphing into a spectacle. Nathan, despite his stature and robe, was on display in a manner most demeaning, judged not by his peers or the law, but by a roadside stop that questioned his very belonging. Finally, the radio squawked back a confirmation, and Officer Baker's posture shifted ever so slightly. "It appears you are who you say you are, Judge Greenwood. However, we need to complete a few more checks. Please remain here." Nathan nodded, though each compliant gesture chafed against his sense of justice. He had upheld the law, believed in it as the great equalizer. Yet here he was, being treated as less than by those sworn to uphold the same principles. Minutes dragged on, slicing through the evening calm with the sharpness of real suspicion. Nathan's mind raced, not just with the immediate indignity, but with the deeper, more corrosive implications of this encounter. How many others without his title, without his voice, had stood in this same spot and found themselves powerless? The officer returned, her expression still neutral. "There are no issues with your vehicle. Judge, you're free to go." The words, meant to be a dismissal, hung heavy in the air. Free to go? Nathan mused on the irony. Was he truly free when his movements through his own neighborhood could be so easily questioned? "Officer, may I have your name and badge number?" Nathan asked, his tone firm. "I intend to follow up on this matter." Officer Baker stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem?" "Judge Greenwood." "Yes, officer, there's a problem," Nathan replied, his voice gaining strength. This stop was not just about a vehicle check. It was about profiling, about assumptions made based on the color of my skin. The officer didn't reply, her silence a gap that Nathan filled with his continued, controlled outrage. "I will be contacting your superior about this incident. It's crucial that we address why this stop occurred in the first place." With a curt nod, Officer Baker handed him a card with her details, and Nathan memorized her face, her badge, her posture. Each would be etched in his complaint, each detail a testament to a moment when the law didn't protect, but instead questioned without cause. As the officer retreated to her cruiser, Nathan remained beside his car, the weight of the evening's injustice settling deep into his chest. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the pavement, shadows that seemed to linger like the many questions Nathan now carried. Was justice truly blind, or was it selectively sighted, choosing when to look away and when to stare too intently? As he finally slid back into his Lexus, the jazz resumed its soft melody, a stark contrast to the cacophony of thoughts racing through Nathan's mind. The drive home would be short in distance, but long in reflection, as he contemplated the legal battles ahead, not just for himself, but for all those who had no gavel to bang in their defense. Reflections and resolutions. As Nathan restarted his car and the soft jazz filled the space, the calming tones couldn't wash away the bitter taste of the encounter. Each note played over the chilling reality of his vulnerability. Despite his judicial robe and societal standing, the drive home was no longer a retreat, but a stark reminder of the world's complexities and the injustices woven through its fabric. Upon arriving home, Nathan sat for a moment in the silence of his garage, gathering his thoughts. His home, usually a sanctuary, felt different tonight. It was as if the walls were pressing in, heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. He knew he couldn't just let this pass. It was bigger than a personal slight. It was indicative of systemic issues that continued to plague even the most esteemed members of the community. Stepping inside, the familiar smells of dinner and the sound of his children's laughter momentarily lifted his spirits. But the comfort was fleeting. His wife, Maria, immediately noticed the troubled look in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern as she approached him. Nathan sighed deeply. "I was stopped by the police on my way home, wrongfully accused of driving a stolen vehicle. It was humiliating." Maria's expression shifted from concern to indignation. "In our own neighborhood? That's outrageous. Nathan, you of all people." "That's just it," Nathan interrupted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It shouldn't happen to anyone. Not just to me, because I'm a judge. It's a clear case of racial profiling." Maria nodded, her anger mingling with empathy. "What are you going to do?" Nathan looked towards the living room, where his children were playing. He thought of the world he wanted for them, a world where they wouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, their actions, and their hearts. "I'm going to file a formal complaint, and I'm thinking about writing an op-ed for the local newspaper. It's time more people understood the reality of these so-called routine stops. It's time our voices were truly heard." Maria placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "I'm with you, every step of the way. Let's make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The following morning, Nathan's resolve had only strengthened. He sat down at his desk, a flurry of emotions guiding his hand as he drafted the complaint to the police department. Every word was measured, reflecting not just his personal grievance, but a plea for broader change. Once the complaint was sent, he began drafting the op-ed, detailing not only the incident, but also discussing the larger issue of systemic racism in law enforcement. He called for accountability, for training, and for community engagement to address these pervasive issues. As he wrote, he could feel the momentum building. This was more than catharsis. It was a catalyst for change. His phone rang continuously, with colleagues and community leaders expressing their support and sharing their own stories of similar encounters. The issue was resonant, the tide of community feeling strong and supportive. Later that week, Nathan's op-ed was published. The response was immediate and powerful. Emails and calls flooded in, not just from within his community, but from across the state and even the nation. People shared their gratitude for his bravery in speaking out and shared their own stories of injustice. The local news picked up the story, and Nathan was invited to speak at community forums and on panels. Each appearance sparked conversations, challenging long-held beliefs and practices. The police department issued a statement about the incident, promising a review of their procedures and additional training for officers. As he became a vocal advocate for justice, Nathan found a new purpose. This wasn't just about correcting a wrong that he had suffered. It was about correcting a societal flaw. It was about ensuring that justice wasn't just a concept taught in law schools, but a reality experienced in the streets of every neighborhood, regardless of one's race or status. Through his advocacy, Nathan not only confronted the issues of racial profiling and police conduct, but also ignited a movement within his community. He facilitated workshops, collaborated with law enforcement to improve community relations, and continued to speak out against injustice wherever he saw it. His initial pain and humiliation had transformed into a driving force for equity and understanding, his personal ordeal becoming a public platform for systemic change. In this journey, Nathan realized the true power of a voice for justice. It wasn't just about wielding a gavel in a courtroom. It was about wielding influence in society to forge a path toward fairness and respect for all. As he looked back on the incident that started it all, he knew that while the road ahead was long, it was one worth traveling, not just for him, but for his children, and for everyone who deserved to feel safe and respected in their own community. Turning tides. As the impact of Nathan's op-ed and his public engagement grew, he realized the depth of change that was possible when individuals chose to speak out. His role as a judge had always placed him in positions of decision-making, but now he was shaping public opinion and policy outside the courtroom. The community forums, in particular, had become a vital space for open dialogue between law enforcement and the community. During one such forum, a diverse crowd gathered in the town hall of Maple Grove. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of tension and anticipation. Community members of all backgrounds, police officers, local politicians, and activists filled the seats, Nathan took the stage, not just as a speaker, but as a mediator who had experienced firsthand the flaws in the system he was striving to improve. "Good evening," Nathan began, his voice calm yet resonant. "We are here today not to point fingers or to wallow in grievances, but to forge a path forward, a path towards understanding and genuine change." The audience listened intently as Nathan shared his story once again, not just recounting the facts, but expressing the fear and humiliation that came with being unjustly targeted. This isn't just about one wrongful stop. This is about every individual who has ever felt the sting of injustice, every young person who fears those who are meant to protect them, and every parent who worries when their child walks out the door. He then turned the floor over to the police chief, who had been part of the recent initiatives to improve police-community relations. The chief acknowledged the need for change. "We are committed to transparency and accountability. We're here to listen, to learn, and to act upon the concerns of our community." The forum opened up for questions and comments from the audience. One by one, residents stood up to share their experiences, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Some stories were painful, detailing encounters that echoed Nathan's. Others spoke of the desire for a community where trust in law enforcement was restored. It was during these discussions that a plan began to take shape. Nathan proposed the creation of a community oversight committee, composed of residents, law enforcement officers, and local leaders. Its purpose would be to review all police actions that resulted in complaints, ensuring that every voice was heard and that no complaint was dismissed without thorough investigation. The proposal was met with applause and cautious optimism. There was a sense that change was truly possible, that the combined efforts of all parties could lead to a safer, more just community. In the weeks that followed, Nathan worked tirelessly to establish the Oversight Committee. He met with legal experts, community organizers, and other judges to draft the guidelines for the committee's operation, ensuring that it would be fair, transparent, and effective. As the committee took form, Nathan saw a shift in the community's engagement with law enforcement. Police officers participated in workshops and training sessions designed to address racial bias and improve interaction with the community. The local police department also began to host open days, where people could come and meet officers in a non-confrontational setting, helping to humanize the men and women behind the badge. Nathan's commitment to this cause did not go unnoticed. He was invited to speak at national conferences and to contribute to policy discussions on a larger scale. His experience had become a case study in overcoming adversity through community action and dialogue. However, for Nathan, the true measure of success came one evening when he was stopped by an officer while walking through a park. This time, the encounter was different. The officer recognized him, not just as a judge, but as a man who had worked to bridge the gap between the police and the community. "Good evening, Judge Greenwood." The officer greeted him with respect. "I just wanted to say, we appreciate what you've done for the community. It's making a difference." Nathan nodded, a sense of accomplishment filling him, mixed with the resolve to continue his work. "Thank you, officer. We're all in this together." As Nathan walked on, the evening sun casting long shadows on the path, he felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead was indeed long, but each step forward was a step towards a community built on the foundations of justice and mutual respect, a community where every individual, regardless of background, could feel safe and valued. Wider impact. The momentum Nathan had ignited in Maple Grove started to ripple outward, reaching beyond the local community to touch other towns and cities facing similar challenges. His initiative had become a beacon of potential reform, showing that constructive dialogue and structured changes could indeed reshape the dynamics between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Encouraged by the positive changes at home, Nathan decided to broaden his impact. He collaborated with legal professionals and activists to create a toolkit for setting up community oversight committees. This toolkit was designed to guide other communities through the process of establishing similar committees, outlining best practices, legal considerations, and effective communication strategies. The dissemination of this toolkit was timely. Across the nation, there was a growing demand for police reform, sparked by high-profile incidents and a burgeoning public awareness of systemic issues. Nathan's comprehensive approach provided a constructive pathway for communities grappling with these complex issues, offering them a model that prioritized accountability and community engagement. As his work gained national recognition, Nathan was invited to participate in a televised panel discussion on criminal justice reform. The panel included prominent activists, police officials, and policymakers. During the discussion, Nathan shared his personal story and the subsequent changes in Maple Grove, emphasizing the importance of community involvement. "We've seen significant progress in Maple Grove," Nathan explained on the panel. "This progress comes from our commitment to listen and to act. Our oversight committee isn't just a watchdog, it's a bridge builder, fostering a sense of shared responsibility for public safety." The response was overwhelmingly positive, and Nathan received numerous requests for interviews and public speaking engagements. He traveled to different states, speaking at universities, law schools, and community centers, advocating for systemic change and the replication of the Maple Grove model. Back at home, the impact of these efforts was palpable. The relationship between the police and the Maple Grove community had transformed. Incidents of racial profiling had significantly decreased, and public trust in law enforcement showed marked improvement, evidenced by community surveys and decreased complaints against officers. One afternoon, as Nathan prepared for another speaking engagement, his teenage daughter approached him. "Dad, my history teacher used your article in our class today," she said, her eyes bright with pride. "We're discussing civil rights and how ordinary people can make a difference. She said you're an example of that." Nathan smiled, touched by her words. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. It's all about making sure we leave things better than we found them, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." His work also began to influence policy. Lawmakers reached out to him for advice on drafting legislation that would require similar oversight mechanisms across the state. Nathan worked with a diverse team to ensure that the proposals were robust and inclusive, drawing from his firsthand experiences and the feedback from community interactions. As these legislative changes took root, Nathan continued to promote education and training. He helped develop a curriculum for police academies that included extensive training on cultural competency, bias awareness, and conflict de-escalation techniques. He believed that education was the key to long-term change and invested his time in speaking to new recruits about the importance of community policing. Years passed, and Nathan watched as the seeds he had planted grew into a national movement towards more equitable and compassionate policing. Retrospectively, he documented his journey in a book titled Justice and Community: Bridging the Divide, which quickly became essential reading in academic circles and among policymakers. As he sat at a book signing, meeting face-to-face with readers whose lives had been touched by his work, Nathan felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Each story shared with him, each thank you, reaffirmed his belief in the power of determined, thoughtful action. His journey had taught him that change, often slow and fraught with challenges, was possible when driven by a commitment to fairness and a deep love for one's community. In Maple Grove and beyond, Nathan's legacy continued to evolve, a testament to the enduring impact of one man's resolve to transform a personal injustice into a nationwide call for reform. As the sun set on another day, Nathan felt hopeful, knowing that each small step forward contributed to a larger stride towards justice. Legacy and continuation. Years into his journey of advocacy and reform, Nathan observed the evolving landscape of community police relations both in Maple Grove and nationwide. His efforts had catalyzed a broader movement, with many communities adopting the oversight committee model and initiating their own local reforms. Nathan's work was now part of a larger national dialogue on police reform and racial justice. As Maple Grove's model became a reference point, Nathan found himself at the forefront of this transformative wave. He was consulted by other cities implementing similar initiatives, and his advice helped shape policies that were more inclusive and effective. His involvement in these projects kept him busy, but every success story fueled his commitment to the cause. On a crisp autumn day, Nathan attended the inauguration of a new community center in Maple Grove, designed to foster engagement and trust between residents and law enforcement. During the ceremony, the mayor thanked Nathan, highlighting his pivotal role in the community's transformation. Nathan Greenwood's vision and perseverance have not only reshaped our police department, but have also strengthened the fabric of our entire community, the mayor declared. The community center was bustling with activity, with programs aimed at youth outreach, legal education, and cultural events that promoted understanding and unity. Nathan watched as children from diverse backgrounds played together, their laughter a sweet sound against the backdrop of conversations between officers and residents, now more partners than adversaries. Feeling the tangible impact of his years of hard work filled Nathan with a profound sense of fulfillment. He knew the road ahead still had its challenges, but seeing the community come together gave him hope and motivation to continue. Later that evening, while reflecting on the day's events, Nathan penned a blog post for his website, where he regularly updated his followers on his activities and thoughts. In his post, he emphasized the importance of persistence in advocacy and the need for patience in seeing through long-term change. Change is not always fast, but with persistence, it is inevitable, he wrote. His words resonated with many, spreading across social media and inspiring others to take action in their own communities. Nathan's role had evolved from a local advocate to a national figure in the fight for justice and equity. Yet his heart remained firmly rooted in Maple Grove. As Nathan prepared for the next chapter of his work, planning a series of workshops across the country, he remained grounded by the support of his family and the community that had stood by him from the start. His legacy was not just in the changes he had helped implement, but also in the empowerment of others to advocate for justice. Looking forward, Nathan was optimistic. Each conversation, each workshop, and each community event was a step toward a more just society. He was committed to continuing this work, driven by a belief in the power of community and the necessity of justice for all. As the night drew to a close, Nathan felt ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that his efforts were part of a larger, ongoing fight for equality and understanding. Expanding the movement. As Nathan's influence grew, he became more involved in shaping national policies. His engagements took him beyond community forums to the halls of power, where legislative changes were crafted. Nathan worked closely with lawmakers to draft bills that mandated the establishment of oversight committees nationwide, ensuring that every police department had a transparent process for accountability. Nathan's days were filled with strategy sessions, presentations, and meetings with stakeholders from various sectors. Despite the hectic schedule, he never lost sight of the grassroots origins of his mission. He frequently returned to Maple Grove to check on the progress of the community center and to maintain his connection with the place where it all began. One particularly rewarding aspect of his work was the mentorship program he initiated for young legal professionals interested in civil rights and community advocacy. Nathan saw this as a way to cultivate a new generation of leaders who could carry forward the torch of justice and reform. On a national level, Nathan's advocacy led to the Community First Policing Act, a landmark piece of legislation that encouraged the formation of oversight committees and provided federal funding for community policing initiatives. The bill also included provisions for the education and training of police officers on racial bias, de-escalation technique, and cultural competency. As the bill moved through Congress, Nathan was a constant presence on Capitol Hill, testifying before committees and working with a bipartisan group of supporters to address concerns and amend proposals to garner wider support. The process was grueling, with many setbacks and challenges, but Nathan's commitment never wavered. When the bill finally passed, it was a moment of immense triumph, not just for Nathan, but for all those who had been part of the journey. Celebrations were held across the country, with Maple Grove hosting a special event where Nathan was honored for his role in championing the legislation. Back in Maple Grove, the community center had become a vibrant hub of activity and symbol of the new relationship between the police and the community. Nathan loved to visit, and see the tangible results of his work. During one visit, he participated in a workshop where police officers and community members came together to share stories and learn from each other. These workshops, part of the initiatives funded by the new law, were instrumental in building trust and understanding. Nathan watched as a young officer spoke about how the training had changed his perspective on policing, and a community elder shared her history with the civil rights movement. The mutual respect in the room was palpable, and Nathan felt a surge of hope for the future. As the movement Nathan helped spark continued to grow, he began writing a second book, focusing on the successes and challenges of implementing community oversight nationwide. The book was intended not only as a record of what had been achieved, but also as a guide for other communities seeking to implement similar changes. Through all these endeavors, Nathan remained a humble figure, always ready to listen and learn from others. His journey had taught him the power of resilience and the importance of sustained collective action in the face of adversity. As Nathan looked toward the future, he envisioned a nation where justice and community were intertwined, where every citizen felt safe and respected by those sworn to protect them. With each step he took, he moved closer to that vision, driven by a deep belief in the possibility of change and the fundamental goodness of people united for a common cause. Consolidation and continuity. After the passage of the Community First Policing Act, the landscape of law enforcement across the United States began to transform. Nathan, having played a crucial role in this change, now shifted his focus toward ensuring the sustainability and effectiveness of these reforms. He embarked on a series of nationwide tours, visiting cities to evaluate the implementation of the oversight committees and community policing initiatives. In each city, Nathan organized town hall meetings that brought together community members, local officials, and law enforcement officers. These forums served as platforms for open dialogue and also as accountability checks, where communities could voice their concerns and successes directly. Nathan's presence and commitment to these discussions greatly encouraged local efforts and ensured that the reforms were not just theoretical, but actively practiced. During one such visit to a mid-sized city grappling with high rates of police incidents, Nathan facilitated a particularly impactful session. He listened intently as residents recounted their experiences, and he brought in experts to train officers in conflict resolution and community engagement. His hands-on approach helped to bridge gaps and mend the frayed trust between the police and the community. Back in Maple Grove, Nathan's mentorship program flourished. He had personally mentored over 24 young professionals who were now active in various facets of civil rights law and community organizing. Seeing his men's lead initiatives and push for further reforms filled Nathan with pride and hope for the future of the movement. To further solidify the gains made, Nathan established a nonprofit organization, the Community Justice Initiative (CJI), with branches in several states. The CJI worked to promote understanding and cooperation between police departments and communities through education, policy advocacy, and direct intervention programs. It also provided resources and support for cities struggling to implement oversight mechanisms. With the CJI's success, Nathan saw an opportunity to influence international human rights practices. He began collaborating with organizations abroad, sharing insights and strategies on community policing and oversight. These international partnerships not only broadened the scope of Nathan's work, but also provided comparative perspectives that enriched the approaches being developed in the U.S. Meanwhile, at home, Nathan's personal life remained a bedrock of support and joy. His family, especially his children, who had grown up witnessing their father's relentless pursuit of justice, were now active in community service and advocacy in their own right. His daughter started a youth dialogue series, bringing young people together to discuss social justice issues, while his son volunteered at the community center, helping to organize educational workshops. As years passed, the impact of Nathan's work became increasingly evident. Crime rates in communities with active oversight committees and robust community policing programs saw significant declines, and public trust in the police improved markedly. These communities also reported fewer incidents of police misconduct and higher rates of crime resolution. Nathan continued to write and speak on justice and community relations, becoming a respected elder statesman in the field. His books were used in universities and police academies alike, and his speeches inspired new generations of activists and reformers. In his later years, reflecting on his journey, Nathan decided to document the entire saga of the movement in a comprehensive documentary. He wanted to leave behind a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of community in achieving lasting change. The documentary combined historical data, personal stories, interviews with key figures, and footage from pivotal moments in the movement. As the documentary premiered, Nathan stood before an audience that included not only friends and family, but young activists, seasoned policymakers, and dedicated law enforcement officers. He looked out over the crowd, his heart full, knowing that while his time at the forefront might be drawing to a close, the movement he helped build was alive, evolving, and more resilient than ever. Nathan's legacy was not just in the laws changed or the policies enacted, but in the vibrant, engaged, and informed community that would carry forward the torch of justice for generations to come. Reflection and legacy. As the lights dimmed at the end of the documentary premiere, a profound silence filled the room. The audience was moved, reflecting on the powerful journey that Nathan had spearheaded, a journey characterized by struggle, resilience, and ultimately, significant societal transformation. When the lights came back on, the room erupted into applause, a standing ovation for Nathan, who humbly acknowledged the recognition with a gracious nod. In the days following the premiere, Nathan found himself in a reflective state. He had spent decades fighting for justice, and now, seeing his life's work encapsulated in a documentary, he felt a mixture of pride and a poignant sense of completion. It was time for him to step back and let the new generation lead the way forward. He announced his decision to retire from active advocacy during a small gathering at the Community Justice Initiative headquarters. "I have done my part, and I trust in the energy and the commitment of those who will follow," Nathan stated, his voice steady and sure. The fight for justice is never-ending, but it is one that evolves with each generation. "I leave knowing that our future is in capable hands." Nathan's retirement was not an end to his influence, but a shift in how his legacy would continue to inspire. The Community Justice Initiative, now well-established, continued to thrive, using Nathan's methodologies and philosophies as foundational principles. His mentor and colleagues carried forward the work with vigor, expanding into new areas of social justice and community engagement. His family, too, remained deeply involved in community service. Nathan's approach to life and his unwavering commitment to justice had deeply influenced his children, who now carried the torch with their initiatives, ensuring that the values he championed continued to resonate within the community. Years later, the city of Maple Grove decided to honor Nathan's contributions. A new community center was built, named after him, the Nathan Greenwood Center for Community and Justice. At the dedication ceremony, city officials, community members, and law enforcement officers recounted the changes Nathan had helped bring about and celebrated the ongoing positive impact of his work. Nathan, older now but still spirited, stood at the podium during the ceremony, his family by his side. He looked over the crowd, seeing familiar faces, some tear-stained, others smiling broadly. He felt a deep sense of peace. "Today is not just about me or any single person," Nathan addressed the gathering. "It's about all of us, about what we can achieve when we come together for the greater good." This center is a symbol of that unity and commitment. Let it be a place where we continue to learn from each other, support each other, and fight for what is right. With those words, Nathan stepped down from the podium to applause, his heart full. In the twilight of his career, he saw not the sunset of his efforts, but the dawn of new possibilities perpetuated by those he had inspired. Nathan spent his later years in quiet contentment, often visiting the center named in his honor, participating in events, and occasionally giving talks. He watched as new leaders emerged, guiding the community with the same fervor and dedication he had always championed. His legacy was not just in the tangible successes or the laws that had been changed, but in the spirit of justice he instilled in countless individuals. Nathan Greenwood's story was one of profound impact, a reminder that one person's courage and determination can indeed change the world, or at least their corner of it.